Hi, this is Ibarian from the Candid Frame. Now, one of the kinds of photography that I really favor is street photography. I love wandering the streets, getting lost, and finding interesting subjects, be it people, be it architecture, or a combination of those two, from which to make a photograph. There's a randomness to the street that I really find inspiring. It's the ability to see in the midst of what seems to be chaos and being able to, within the confines of the frame, make something that's really beautiful and interesting and engaging. And for the last several years, there's been a resurgence in the interest of street photography, and some great pictures have been made. But there's also been a lot of bad stuff that this just falls into the cliche of what people think street photography is. To a large extent, people think that street photography is just taking pictures of people walking down the street. There's not anything particularly interesting happening. It's just a person walking a street, but convert it to black and white and do some massaging in Photoshop, and people automatically think that this is great street photography, which isn't the case. Certainly, life on the street and people walking up and down the street and interesting things happening have always been a real big part of this, but so many of the images are rather mediocre that it kind of makes me think, well, what makes a good street photograph? And that's all up for debate. But I decided to look through the images here in the Candid Frame Flickr group and just see images that I really liked, that I felt fell into the genre of street photography, and talk about what it is I like about them within the confines of that definition. So let's go ahead and jump in here. We have an image here by Beller, and it looks like it was shot in a barbershop in the West Village in Manhattan. And what happens behind the doors of these stores that we walk by on the street sometimes is even more interesting than what's happening on the street itself. And I really like this photograph because it gives us a perspective of peering into another world. And it's I like the composition because the man holding the door is sort of like inviting us in to take a look at what's happening within the scene. And all the different things that are happening here are really kind of interesting. The guy holding the door, the guy at his elbow who's looking at the photographer, the barbers in the back cutting hair, this figure of this guy here looking as if he's talking to someone else, and even in the reflection of the mirror, we get glimpses of the space. And you look at all the details that make this place feel like an old school barber shop. And I like this image. It's not taken literally on the street, but I think it qualifies as a street photograph just because it has all the kinds of elements that I'm looking for. I'm looking for, interaction, reaction between people, some sort of action or gesture that really sort of drives it. Uh, the tones, it being done in black and white, allow us to focus on what's happening rather than just the color that may exist on the scene. I don't see any tech information here in terms of what kind of camera stuff that he was using, but that really kind of doesn't matter. It's a good shot, and it happened at a fleeting moment. I don't know if this guy was sort of walking out the door that was momentarily interrupted by something, but I like that this door is open because it provides not only a clearer view of what's happening inside the image, but it creates that dynamic as if we're about to walk into the space and into this world. Here's another shot by Raphael, and I like this shot because of the repeating pattern, the colors, and the shape. And this is something that I might have encountered just walking down the street. I see a lot of stuff like this, where I see buildings and structures with interesting color, repeating shapes, and different patterns. There isn't a person in here, but nevertheless, Raphael is able to create a real nice graphic image from what appears to be like a sidewalk or a driveway into the space. When you're thinking about street photography, you need to be open to all the possibilities that are out there. It's not just about, taking a picture of people walking down the street. Sometimes the environment itself is enough of a character to compose a photograph about. And I think that that's the case here. I think it says here something about Hamburg, so it may be that may be the city where this was taken. But I think it's an important image to show because it kind of indicates that there's subject matter everywhere, and we can't always lock ourselves into thinking, well, there's only one or two things that qualify as a good street photograph, and just make that image. Now here's a picture that I think is one of the better ones in terms of street photography. These guys are appearing to be the painting graffiti, and you have all the signs there. They got the hoodies, you got the cans of spray paint down on the ground, you got the letter on the upper left hand corner, you have the graffiti wall not only in the middle ground but in the background. And it's an interesting shot, but it's the figure that's running across the frame with what appears to be a skateboard that makes the shot. With a street photograph, the initial shot might have been just these guys working on this wall, and as composed here, it would have been just a sort of okay shot. But the inclusion of that person running into the frame with a skateboard really makes it. It creates this contrast between blurred and sharp, and it adds an energy to the scene that otherwise would be lacking. Otherwise, it would be a fairly static scene. And when I'm shooting and I find a scene similar to this, I'm always waiting for that one telling element, that one gesture that will help complete the shot. Oftentimes it's a person walking into the frame, or it can be something else like a bird flying in from virtually nowhere and then entering the frame. The shot without that figure is basically a setting. It has the potential for a great shot. We got some great elements in the scene, from the wall, the figure, the spray paint, the ladders, all that other stuff. But there's always something more that I'm going to be looking for, that I'm going to be waiting for. And sometimes scenes like this, where it's almost there, you just got to camp out and wait. It might take 5 minutes, it might take 10 minutes, it might take 30 minutes, or even an hour. But there are scenes like this where you feel like, wow, there's a potential for a great shot, and it's really easy to just make the shot that was in front of you and then simply walk away. But if this person had not waited for that person to come in with a skateboard, the shot would not have been as effective as this. So a big part of really good street photography is often just waiting around. You see the potential of a scene, you compose your shot, you do all the things with exposure and focus, but then you just wait. You just wait for that one telling moment. Here's a shot that is shot here in Pershing Square in Los Angeles by John Krill. And this is a place where I have photographed many a time. It's in downtown Los Angeles. And I have yet to make an image in this particular part of the park that I'm really happy with. I think this one does a pretty good job with the scene. The buildings, this building is a really bright yellow, and the adjoining building is a really rich purple. And I'm always trying to find ways of using the shapes and the colors in the scene to make a great photograph. And you can see here that you get some great light at different points of the day, which is always something I want to take advantage of. If you take a look at this shot without these people in there, it's just nothing. You might like the color, but it's just missing that little something. But by including these figures who are coming up probably from the escalator from the subway and moving out into the light, you all of a sudden have an action element. You have something dynamic happening with the scene that keeps it from becoming too static. As a counterpoint, you have these cones and you have this figure up in the background, which helps create a balance to the shot. I would have loved to have someone like right here to even create a better counterpoint to these people here, but even without that, I think the shot makes really good use of this space. I've yet to make my own definitive image in this space, but every time I go downtown, I find myself over here just waiting to find the perfect moment that I can document with my camera. Now here's Zima with Maj, and here's a great shot that was made on the street. There's this kid here hanging out to this pole. Looks like it's in Britain somewhere, and I just love the composition. The boy with his hand on the pole, sort of leaning away from it, looking at something, and the way that the light is shining on behind him, and it gives his hair a little bit of highlight. And then you have the bus behind him, and that great red and that little spot of red and white contrast that we get in the background. I love the tension of the shot. The image is composed a little off kilter, But I really like that because it provides this energy to the scene. It seems like the bus is moving, that it's not just static there, and that the boy is sort of leaning away from the pole, and the angle of the composition makes it feel like it's really weighted in that way, as if he's trying to hold himself from being pulled away off to the left of the frame. And the expression is really good. This is one of those sort of quiet moments that I think are always great to see in a photograph. Yeah, you have a person sort of standing there, really kind of doing not much of anything, but within the context of the composition, there's a whole lot happening here. It really sort of, you ask the question, what's happening? What's he looking at? Is he looking at his parent? Is he looking at a friend? Is he alone out there? What exactly is happening? And it makes it a really fun shot. He doesn't seem to be exactly tack sharp in the photograph, but for me, that's sort of a moot point. I think that the overall content of the photograph really makes it effective, and I think this is a shot to be proud of. Here's another shot by Nasir Hamid. Here's a shot of someone walking. And it's just that. You have this sort of space with this old kind of architecture, and you have a guy just walking out through that entryway out into the street. And I like this shot because of the light and the shadow. If this had been sort of a overcast day without the presence of that shadow, without the light on him and in the background, or imagine the shot even without him in the frame. Let's start with that. Yeah, we get some nice pattern from the grill work of what hangs over the door up on the wall. But if you took that shot without a figure in it, it would just be rather blah. But having him in that shot really makes the image. The contrast that's created by, the darkness of his body, his coat against the brighter background, the shadow that's sort of cast on the wall is great. And I love the way the coat seems to like flare out as if wind was coming sweeping up into the coat and making it sort of wave like a flag. There's so much animation happening within his body and within that coat that even though this is a still image, it still expresses a lot in terms of animation, of energy, of just a little bit of drama. There's a little mystery to this shot just because you don't see his face and you're wondering where is he going to. And it's great that they have this little element of like the bike here in the far distance in the background. Is he walking towards the bike? Is that his destination? Regardless of whether it is or not, I like that there's that little element there within the shot to make the background just a little more complex. So this is a shot where, yes, it's someone walking, but it's so much about the play of light and shadow and gesture and contrast that really makes it an effective photograph. Here's one by Michael Meinhardt, and this shot is something I'm always trying to remember to try and do myself, and that is to take pictures of reflections. I look at pictures like this, and I'm always reminded, I need to look for more reflections in my shot. Because they can make very interesting photographs because they reveal separate planes of activity, of existence, all within the context of the one frame. You have what appears to be inside this cafe, someone sort of working in sunglasses or just having a coffee, and then you get a reflection of all the activity out on the street. And that combination in this particular shot are really great. The gesture of the guy with his hand on his head looking out into the street is just wonderful. You can imagine the shot with just the reflection. If the guy had not been in the shot wouldn't have been as interesting. It would just have been a reflection. But the great thing about it is that you got these sort of diagonal lines that within the coffee shop itself, it seems to be a light, or it could be the outdoor. It's really hard to discern. But you got these great diagonal lines here. You got one in the crosswalk, and it seems like it's forcing us to read the image from the left and all the way to the right. And he's plopped there, right there in the middle of the frame. So your eye just goes swoop and bang right there. And if your eye continues, it kind of stops at this figure here on a laptop. But it's amazing how the reflection and the interior all combine to really shape the flow of the image so that we settle on this guy with the sunglasses. And I love the fact that the sunglasses are giving us yet another reflection of what's happening. It's it's a great shot. It's not easy to pull off this kind of shot. I see a lot of pictures of reflections, but a lot of times they just kind of, they're interesting because the complexity of the reflection adds to the shot, but it doesn't really make a great photograph. And I think this one is certainly one of those. It's the kind of reflection shot I wish I could make. Here's another shot. Brett Hingham. Hingham. I'm sorry, I'm always really bad with the names. But take a look at this. This scene where sunglasses seem to be passed on to this little boy, or vice versa. And then you have this kid and this older gentleman in the background. And what I like about this shot is that the photographer is right in there. I mean, he can't be more than, maybe 12 inches or 15 inches from those hands in the shot, but it captures a moment on the street in a way that makes it very, very intimate, which I love. So much of street photography is often done with a 35 millimeter lens, and people are standing, or the photographers are standing anywhere between 6 or 10 or 12 feet away from the subject. So the subject ends up being relatively small within the frame. And while there may be something interesting happening in there, it lacks the sort of like, I'm in that moment, I'm in that space that this image provides. I don't know how the image was shot, whether it was just done on the fly or whether this was a group of people that the photographer was with, but irregardless of what the circumstances was, I really like that the person got in very, very tight with what looks to be a fairly wide angle lens. It's the gesture of the hands on the sunglasses is great, and I love that through one of the lenses you can see the boy's eye, and then you have these sort of figures in the background, the little boy and the man, and you're really wondering about what the relationship is between all these people. You get some stuff in the background that gives us a sense of place, which is nice. But the light is great. Again, it's light and shadow. That strong, dramatic light. We lose some detail in the face of the boy and the man, but that's of little importance because the key figure in the shot is the little boy holding the sunglasses. And it's a great shot. One of the things that I try to do with my street photography is to get in close with a wide angle lens, because there's a drama that happens when you're using wide angle lenses very close on the street that produce shots that are unlike anything else. Here's a shot by DV8, shot in a sort of a courtyard, and this alone, the backdrop of the scene, this courtyard, provides some really interesting graphic elements. You have the repeating squares, you have the diagonal lines, you have the triangles throughout, and the light definitely provides a really wonderful element in the shot. And you could have taken this shot and just created a graphic composition of the scene, but it's the two figures in the frame that really make the shot, that elevate it from just being a sort of a static exploration of line and shape. And it's really all about timing. You have that figure right next to that sort of Hershey's Kiss looking shaped thing, and there's the light hitting there, and his shadow is cast against the surface, and then you have that other guy in the foreground there with the glasses and the dark sweater, who's also entering the frame and adding a sense of dynamism to the shot. It's great. I think those two figures are just fantastic, having them in the frame. Their legs are splayed such that their legs themselves are creating triangles, which helps in reinforcing that pattern of triangles that exist throughout the frame. And like the other shot that I mentioned, this is a shot that comes out as a result of just waiting. You see a setting, you see a space, you see the potential for it, and then you just sort of camp yourself there, and you just wait for the figures to come into the room to complete the shot. I don't know how many shots he made until he was able to make this one, but in my experience, sometimes you have to make a lot of shots, and you have to be constantly aware of what's happening on the periphery of your frame in order to be prepared to make a really good shot. I would have loved to have had another figure here to help balance the shot. I think that it would have been nice to have like a little trio, like a little triptych of figures within the frame. Sometimes you just got to camp out there and just wait, and it can take an hour, maybe even more, for that to happen. But sometimes it's worth the wait. But sometimes it doesn't. And an image as good as this is the best that we can do. But this is still an image that I really like the fact that he more than likely just waited for the scene to happen, and captured it and made the most out of the setting. Here's a shot by Paid Photography, and I really like this shot. It's really simple, and it breaks a lot of rules of photography, but I think it works. I mean, the framing is off kilter. It's not perfectly, not everything is not perfectly parallel and in line. It's something that people would probably try to correct in Photoshop. The boy is in the center of the frame. You've cut off this figure of the horse on the left, and but I like the shot. I really like the shot. I love the gesture of the boy who's leaning against this wall and his hand up on his shoulder and has this sort of pained expression or bemused expression. And then you have this half of a horse in the left hand of the frame. And the image is unbalanced, but I think that's one of the reasons I like it. Yeah, you could have had a figure out here and then corrected the fact that the frame is off kilter and get a more balanced composition, but it seems like this moment is a little bit off kilter, so I don't mind it that much. I love the dappled light. The dappled light can often be a very difficult kind of light to shoot under, but I like the way that, you know, we get different tonalities and different shades of color on this wall in the back with the horse. But it seems that the light hits all the right spots. I mean, the light hits the boy's face and his arm, and the light hits the leg and the hoof of this horse. And it's just a great shot. Sometimes you got to break the rules, or sometimes we break the rules without without knowing any better, and we end up making a great shot. And I think this is a wonderful, wonderful image. And lastly, we have another image by Michael Meinhardt. And here's a great example of stuff that's happening on the street. This couple seem to be maybe arguing or having a very serious discussion about something. But here's something that's happening on the street, on a public space, and there's this dynamic thing that is happening between two characters on the scene, and capturing their image really captures that moment. I mean, the moment is all about their body language and expression. You have a great setting with the sea and the boats out in the distant background. You got this great light, the cloudy skies, but it's the body language of this couple that really makes the shot interesting. The way that he's pointing at her a little bit accusingly, and even though he's wearing the sunglasses, you have a feeling that he's looking at her very intently. And then there's her, you know, as if she's sort of halfway moving in a certain direction. Her hand is to her mouth. Her other hand is on her hip. There's the body language expresses that there's something happening here. There's a sense of mystery to the shot, and that's really wonderful. But I also love the tonality. I like the fact that they're wearing these light-colored pants and these off-white tops, and it creates a contrast between their skin and the clothing that they're wearing. And just everything about the shot is just comes together really beautifully. So yeah, here you have two people on the street, but it's leaps ahead of just photographing two people walking down a sidewalk. This really sort of is an observation how people interact and relate to each other in a really public space. And it's a great shot. I know a lot of people would be intimidated about creating a shot like this, but here he did it with a Canon PowerShot S110, and it's a great photograph. And I think it's a testament to the fact that you don't need a big SLR or an expensive Leica camera in order to make a great street photograph. It's great to see that he used a very simple point-and-shoot camera, but made a photograph that I think photographers who even owned a more expensive camera would be envious of. So that's it for today. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos. I find it kind of really interesting going into the pool of photographs here and coming up with different topics to talk about. There's much more that I want to do with this channel, but right now I'm having a good time doing this. So hopefully if you're listening to this, you've already asked to be added to the Candid Frame group. And if you haven't, just go to Flickr and ask to join the Candid Frame Flickr group, and I'll be glad to add you. And I'm really liking this. Send me some feedback in terms of what you're seeing here, whether you like it. You can email me at info@thecandidframe.com, or simply post a message here on the Flickr page. If you haven't already, please listen to my podcast, The Candid Frame, which you can find at thecandidframe.com. There you'll hear interviews with some of the world's best emerging and established photographers. And if you want to be inspired about your photography, well, that's the best destination to get some inspiration from some really great photographers and some really, really great people. So that's it for me, and I'll see you next time.